the Rapture and the Tribulation. This lesson builds in part on the previous podcast, 2010-2012, and the end of the world. In that podcast, we reviewed the way that history is littered with failed predictions of the end of the world. We highlighted the fascination with end-time events, which is so common in the religious world. And we also emphasized that it's so much easier to look for signs, to indulge in speculation, than it is to live a consecrated life. When I was a teenager, I was starting to become religious. I was inching towards a biblical faith in Jesus Christ. I had heard about the rapture, I suppose from some of the meetings I'd been attending. And one day, I had an idea for a book, for a novel. And I shared this with a friend of mine. And I said, what if it began on an airplane and gradually more and more people just seem to be missing from the flight? The flight's in the air. And eventually, someone goes to the cockpit, the door's opened, and the pilots are missing because they've been raptured. Well, this actually is the way a very lucrative series began. Many of you have heard of the Left Behind series. No, they didn't get the idea from me. If they had, I'd be rich. When I was a teenager and had that thought, I shared it with my friend, who in fact went on himself to become a successful novelist, but not me. Sometimes we see a bumper sticker. On the back of a car, you'll see a notice that says, in event of rapture, this vehicle will be unmanned. I've seen quite a few pictures that depict what many believe will happen at the end, as the righteous are being whisked off to heaven before the show begins, before the bad things start to happen on earth. The typical scenario is that the Christians are taken up in the rapture, and then God in his wrath pours out his anger, his plagues on the world, and the times will be terrible. This is the tribulation. And the typical scenario, well, the weather goes crazy. Volcanoes are blowing their tops. The oceans are tossing. There are wars. The Antichrist comes. There's one world government. With the tribulation, Jesus sets up his earthly kingdom in Jerusalem, and our unsaved neighbors are staring desperately at us as we float away into the stratosphere, leaving them behind on a planet that will become the pitiable object of the unleashed wrath of God. Is this scenario right? Is it biblical? Is it scriptural? What does the Bible say? Let's talk about rapture first. The text that informs this part of the lesson is 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 to 18. When Paul wrote his letters to the Thessalonians, apparently there were some who were so excited about the end of the world that they had stopped living productive lives. And so he encourages everyone to do something useful, not to sit it out, but to be involved